Hey beauty, if you've been running on empty for months, fatigue, a body that won't cooperate, low energy, no amount of sleep fixes, and part of you has quietly wondered if God is doing this to you or just letting it happen, stick with me. Today I'm walking through 5 biblical reasons God allows suffering and what to actually do while you're still in it. Okay, I have to tell you before I begin that these 5 reasons may not sound super encouraging, so be sure to stick to the end where you will get some encouragement to keep going. What I see in the Bible is that God allows suffering so that the works of God might be displayed in us. This is from John chapter 9. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. So in this passage, Jesus is clarifying that the man wasn't blind because of sin. It says, It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. Later on in this passage, Jesus heals the man of his blindness. So if God has healed you from something or brought you out of a trial, I encourage you to tell others about this so that God might be glorified because of the suffering that you went through. This next reason that God allows suffering comes from the book of Job. Honestly, I don't completely understand the book of Job, and I've heard people talk about it. And some things that people say about the book of Job, what he went through, what he said, I don't think are completely accurate. So, in my mind, it just comes down to this: God works in ways we don't understand, God does things that we don't understand. If you remember in the book of Job, Job basically loses everything. He loses his family, he loses his health. In the end, God gives Job twice as much as he had before. But the story is still confusing to me. And when God speaks to Job, here's an example of what he says. Job 38, verse 4. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? God's basically telling us He's the creator of the earth. He created these powerful animals, if you look further in the book. He knows the measurements of the earth. He knows how many hairs we have on our heads. We just can't understand certain things. And in a way, this is kind of frustrating, right? But it just proves that we serve an infinite God. He knows everything, He can do everything. So, of course, we won't be able to understand all his ways. We won't be able to understand why he does what he does. God also allows suffering temporarily for our protection. In the book of Genesis, Joseph has a dream that people will bow down to him. He tells his brothers get mad, they sell him, they plan to kill him, but they end up selling him into slavery. So Joseph becomes a slave. He's falsely accused of something. He's thrown into jail. It actually takes him I think it was 17 years for him to reach that dream that God gave him. Before he is made Pharaoh's second in command, he becomes a slave. He goes to prison. And Joseph explains why this all happened in Genesis 50. Joseph forgives his brothers for what they did, but after Jacob, their father, dies, they're scared that Jacob will retaliate against his brothers. Genesis chapter 50, verse 15 says this. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. This is such a beautiful picture of forgiveness. Before Joseph became a powerful man, like I said, he was thrown into slavery, sold into slavery by his brothers. He was falsely accused and he was thrown in prison. So he was basically in chain for, I think it was about 17 years. But when his brothers came to him scared and they offered themselves as servants to Joseph, he said to them, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." So God knew what was going to happen, right? He knew that Joseph's brothers were going to sell him into slavery, and they meant that for evil. But at the same time, God had a plan. He wanted Joseph to be a ruler in Egypt to save the Israelites, to even save Joseph and his brothers and Jacob. He knew that there would be a famine, and he planned that Joseph would be a leader in Egypt to save his people. But if you remember, when Joseph had that dream of being a leader in Egypt, he was just a kid with no experience. God brought him through all those trials, through all the training that he went through, so that he could be a better leader. Potiphar placed him in charge of his household, even though he was a slave. When he was in prison, he was also appointed as a leader in the prison. So God allowed Joseph's suffering temporarily so that he could protect his people and also protect Joseph from the famine that was coming. You could say that Joseph's suffering was basically his training ground. Everything that he went through taught him how to be a better leader. So if you are suffering from chronic illness, low energy, autoimmunity, or you're going through a trial in your life, it could be that this is God training you for something bigger. God also allows suffering because God's power is made perfect in weakness. This is from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, starting in verse 7. This is Paul. "So to keep me from being conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" So theologians disagree about what Paul's thorn in the flesh was. Some people think it's a health issue, some people think it's persecution. Whatever it is, it's something that Paul prayed to God to remove, but God did not remove this thorn in the flesh, whatever it was. And Paul said the thorn kept him from being conceited. God says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul says, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." We won't be as effective for God if we're conceited, right? And when we think that we're so strong that we can do things, God can't really use us as much, right? We don't have any reason to be conceited or puffed up. So when we get conceited or arrogant or puffed up and think that we can do things in our own power, we take the reins and try to do things in our own power. And when we do that, that's when we limit God. So sometimes God allows a thorn so that we will not be conceited. And so he will be able to display his power because God's power is made perfect in our weakness. God also allows suffering so we will not be lacking in anything. James chapter 1, starting in verse 2, says this: "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. Honestly, this point is hard for me because I don't really want to go through various trials. A part of me says that, but as I look at this verse again, if trials will help me to be a better servant for God so that I will not be lacking in certain things, yes, I can bend my knee. I can go through these trials for God. So, what do we do when we're waiting for God to heal us? What do we do when we're waiting for God to take us out of a bad situation or a situation that appears bad to us? I believe that God really loves it when we have faith, when we trust Him, no matter the circumstances. Luke 8, starting in verse 43. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Okay, I have to say this because I feel like I keep hearing this from different people who are having health issues. I have heard from different people. I've read someone posted something on Substack saying that when someone is suffering with when someone is having health issues and they go to people in the church, sometimes people say to them, "If you just had more faith, then you would be healed." First of all, do people really say that? Because I don't know why someone would just say that. I do believe that faith is huge in the Bible, right? God wants us to have a huge faith like a child. The Bible also says that we lack faith. We can ask God for more faith. It says if you only had the faith of a mustard seed, you could tell a mountain to move and it would move. I'm paraphrasing. So, in my mind, Jesus was basically saying that we all don't have a lot of faith. So, yes, I do believe that faith plays a part in our healing. I don't really necessarily understand how it works, but I wouldn't say to someone, "You are not healed because you don't have enough faith." Who am I to know who has more faith than another person, right? And I just read that passage that talked about the man that was blind. He wasn't blind because of a lack of faith. God allowed him to be blind so that the works of God might be displayed in him. So, yes, faith does play a part in healing, but if you haven't been healed yet, that doesn't mean you haven't been healed because you don't have enough faith. I just want you to hear that. And if anyone has ever said to you that that if you had more faith, then you would be healed, I just want to apologize and say that I am not sure why someone would tell you that because they don't they can't see inside your mind, they can't see your heart, and that's just not a compassionate thing to say at all. So I'm sorry if anyone has ever said that to you. So when we are waiting for God for healing or for something, we should continue to have faith and trust in God. We should also be obedient to whatever God is telling us to do, right? I talk about this in my book, Discover God's Health Wisdom. In 2 Kings chapter 5, Naaman was told to dip in the Jordan River, I think it was 5 times, and then he would be healed of his leprosy. But he didn't want to do it, and he almost didn't do it. When he finally did do it, he was healed of his leprosy. God might be telling you to do something right now about your health or your situation, and if you're not doing it, I really encourage you to do it. Because number one, if you're disobeying God, that's just never a good thing to do, right? We should just obey God. But also, I mean, everything that God tells us to do, it's for our good. So whatever God's telling you to do, if you're not doing it, I encourage you to do it, to be obedient. Also remember the principle of you reap what you sow, right? So if you obey God, of course, something good will come from that. If you have good habits, good things will come from that. If you have bad habits, bad things will come from that, right? Overall, I just want you to remember that God is so good. When I'm looking through the Old Testament, there are so many things that I don't understand. Like how I was saying, I don't really understand the book of Job. I don't really understand things in Ezekiel, for instance, how Ezekiel's wife died and God said not to publicly mourn her. I don't understand a lot of things, but I do understand with my limited understanding that God is good. And I know this because I've experienced his goodness through trials. I know that it would only be a good God who would lower himself, who would come down to earth as a baby. He humbled himself. He was tortured and he died for us. He died for me, a person who he knew would keep messing up, a person who would not be perfect, a person that would reject him. I don't reject him right now, but I'm definitely not a perfect child, right? So remember that God is good. Remember that God will never leave you nor forsake you. That's Hebrews 13:5. And remember Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. God's going to work it all together for good. If you love him, he's going to take your financial struggles, take your broken relationships, take your trauma, take your past mistakes, your regrets, your shame, the wasted time. He takes everything bad and he makes it into something good. That's a promise. I don't know how he does it, but he does over and over and over again. He's doing it right now, even though we might not be able to see it. I pray that we do see it. I pray that God opens up our eyes and opens our ears to hear and see everything that he's doing, all the good things that are going on are all around us. I hope that this episode was encouraging to you. I just want to let you know that if you're struggling with autoimmunity, with low energy, with chronic symptoms, I've been there. If you need help figuring out what your next step is when it comes to your health, I would love to help you with that. Go to herholistichealing.com/services. I will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening today. If you like what you heard, would you take a minute to leave the show a review? I would love to connect with you at herholistichealing.substack.com. This content is for informational purposes only and is not meant to be medical advice.